Welcome everyone to our first Zoom lecture and meditation with Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf from Melbourne, Australia. Tonight is Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat, being the new year of the trees and the fruit, has a relationship to us as well, because it says, for man is like a tree of the field. And since we are likened to a tree of the field, by extension, we celebrate this holiday as well. And like a tree has roots and branches and bears fruit, we too have roots and branches and are able to bear fruit. And part of being a healthy tree with deep roots and beautiful branches and beautiful fruit is nurturing the growth of the tree and ensuring that the roots are deep and the tree is healthy. So tonight, we're having a lecture and meditation, something that will lend itself to nurturing us as trees, our growth spiritually. So tonight we have with us Rabbi Laibl Wolf, Rabbi Dr. Laibl Wolf from Melbourne, Australia. He's the Dean of Spirit Grow in Melbourne. Rabbi Wolf is an unusual exponent of ancient wisdoms and cutting-edge psychology. He's internationally renowned as a highly entertaining lecturer and a celebrated author of the best-selling Practical Kabbalah. A graduate of law and psychology, he's also a Lubavitcher Chassid with a published repertoire of training materials on mindfulness, meditation, and relaxation response techniques. He's the founder of Spirit Grow Center in Australia. His works have been acclaimed by diverse leaders across the world. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Olav HaShalom of blessed memory, the Dalai Lama and late Chief Rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu. He's described as the Jewish synthesis of Tony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, and Deepak Chopra. Okay, so without further ado, Rabbi Wolf.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you. And thank you for that very expansive introduction. You've obviously done some homework on that. I always get a little bit embarrassed when my credentials are read out. Usually I have my wife in the room with me when I lecture, and she keeps me well in check. But in Zoom, I get away with murder, so it's okay. Fine,
Most important part of your intro was your very Australian, a very, very Australian connection.
Yes, I was actually raised in Australia from the age of 2. My parents are Holocaust survivors from Poland. I just noticed that there's someone on our Zoom who has the surname, or it has the name Weintraub, and Weintraub was actually the name of my Zayda Olav HaShalom. And we'll have to compare notes and see if we're related. Anyway, here we are together, talking about how to overcome fear and anxiousness and to breed something much better. And it's Tu B'Shvat, as Rabbi Zalmi noted. So it's a very auspicious moment. You know, when time keeps changing, not changing just in terms of date and hours, but in spiritual quality. Every single hour of the day has its muzzle, has its particular spiritual flow that characterizes that time frame. Likewise, of course, in terms of days of the year, and specifically when it's a special day like Tu B'Shvat, the Rosh Hashanah La'ilanot, the Rosh Hashanah for trees. And one wonders, how do trees have a Rosh Hashanah? Well, everything has a soul. Everything possesses a nefesh. Of course, we allocate nefesh to a human being, but did we understand that there is a nefesh level in animals, in plants, like trees, and even in stones, inanimate objects? So let me begin our presentation in the following way. I'm going to try to explain to you the nature of human personality And that'll give us some clues as to how and why we respond to the exigencies of today's challenging times in the multifarious ways that we do. Then I want to do a meditation exercise to help alleviate some of those stresses. And I'll introduce what meditation is in the Jewish spiritual tradition. And then we'll have my favorite part, which is when I can dialogue with you, learn from you, and gain all the information that I haven't had to date. So when I said that everything possesses a soul, this usually surprises people. I mean, stones, really? Soul? Yes, the word soul, of course, is a very nebulous word in the English language. But a stone possesses a soul. Otherwise, how could its molecular structure, how could its atomic structure, how could its subatomic structure, how could its finite energy forces exist without there being some sort of spiritual energy that transfers into the finite and gives the stone its shape? And of course, the difference between a stone and a flower, or a stone and a tree, is that stones don't tend to walk about. And yet trees and plants do have a certain degree of motion. They grow, they incline towards the sun. And that's because they have another level of complexity in their soul, not just nefesh, but a level called the ruach as well. And of course, animals add on to that because they have true locomotion. They can really move around, and they have some rudimentary communication. And that's because they have yet another level in the complexity of their soul. And finally, the human being. And the human being is distinguished from the animal, as you can well understand, that we have a state of consciousness, self-awareness, a sense of past, present, and future, conscience, a sense of right and wrong. And that is because of the complexity of our soul is more so. But everything is ensouled. And that's why we have an absolute mitzvah to respect our environment, which I say in context of today, especially trees. And there are actually, there is in the Torah itself statements as to how we should honor trees. But let me go back to what we're saying. And therefore, if we have these levels of soul, how do they translate into personality? Well, they're given a finite physical spacesuit to operate in the rarefied atmosphere of physical world, time and space. That spacesuit we call the body, guf. In other words, our spiritual self, the soul, needs the body to express through time and space. And that's why there's another very important mitzvah, health and wellness. Maintaining health and wellness is as much a mitzvah as a Shabbos and Kashrus, no less. And that's because to idealize the flow of our spiritual self, the neshama, through the body has to be in good shape. It has to be healthy and well. And that's how we express. But let me pose to you the following conundrum. When a person dies, God forbid, we should all live bis 120. When a person dies, 5 seconds before they die, their ears could hear everything perfectly. Let's say that's the case. 5 seconds after they die, they stop hearing. They no longer hear. In those 5 seconds, there has not been any decomposition of the matter of the body. The physiology of the ear is still intact. Why has the person stopped hearing? And you'll say, Laibl, that's obvious, the person is dead. But what does dead mean? So it means something has gone missing. That something is the neshamas flow through the physiology of the ear. When the neshama, when the soul flows through the physiology of the ear, we experience that as hearing. When it flows through the different machinery called the eye, we experience that as seeing. Through the brain, we experience that as mind, In English, there's many words: intellect, intelligence, cogitation, thought, etc. But this is already when the two are synergized, the neshama flowing through the body. Death means that the neshama no longer flows through the body in the same way. Why do I raise these points? Because you and I have the capacity to be able to direct the flow of the neshama through the body. The ultimate experience of that is called consciousness. But we can direct our consciousness. We can be masters of our own inner self through self-discipline, through insight, and through practice, which I'll come to discuss a bit more when we discuss meditation. Now, having just established that you and I are a composite, we're two in one, we're spiritual dimension and finite physical dimension, let's now look at the nature of consciousness. How do we perceive the world? So when I spoke about the soul, it was as if it were one unitary flow into us. It's not. The neshama flows into us and divides, as if it divides, into two strands of consciousness. One strand of consciousness, which we call the nefesh bahamis, which is literally translated as animalistic self, is really our ego self. It's also our instinctive survival function. It's what concerns us about ourselves. Maslow pointed this out in a nice hierarchical model, and he said it's food, clothing, shelter, then self-actualization. Food, clothing, shelter are the prerequisites for our existence. Without the nefesh bahamis, we wouldn't quest for that. We'd be like angels. We'd be totally idealistic and outside of our bodies. In other words, it's our drive to self-maintenance that ultimately keeps us alive. So our lower self, what I called our ego self, plays an important part. The only problem is it doesn't know when to stop. How much food? How much clothing? How much shelter? Food-wise? No, I'm not going to eat anything unless it's Master Chef cooked. Clothing? Unless it's designer label, I'm not going to wear it. Shelter? Well, I've got to have a mansion with, like the one in Gone with the Wind, pillars and columns in front, chandeliers in every room, and a chandelier in the toilet to boot. In other words, my lower order self never knows when to stop. More. This is what we call insecurity, which breeds fear. We always have a sense that I need to prop myself up more and more. I have to defend myself against the COVID more and more. There is nothing that I wouldn't do to defend myself. I need to secure myself. That's my animalistic side. Not treating it negatively, but we can become, unfortunately, disoriented by it, too self-centered by it. Comes along the second strand. The second strand of the soul is called nefesh elokit, nefesh elokis. What does that mean? That's our altruistic self. That's the godly self. That's the part that relates to ultimate ideals, true connectivity between people, loving relationships, reaching out and connecting to knowledge, and ultimately connecting to Hashem. So you've got these two seemingly opposing forces operating within, and that's why human beings are constantly in a state of conflict. Conflict between our lower order self and higher order self. I need to protect myself, but I have to give of myself. And this tension runs through every aspect of life and every aspect of consciousness, through my thought patterns, through the way I speak and what I speak about, and how I behave and comport myself, whether in public or in private. In other words, there's a lot of mastery practice to be able to implement, to be able to overcome that state of inner conflict, and to be able to become a person of confidence, a person of faith, a person of poise, and a person who has a positive sense of the future, which is what our topic is all about, and especially under current circumstances. We're facing a pandemic, and the pandemic is certainly something extremely serious. But let's give it context. The context I want to give you, without belittling the danger, is 96% of the world has survived. 4% of the world has unfortunately been affected. Only 4%. The survival rate is over 80% in any one instance. The number of deaths that take place is minimal. That doesn't change the unfortunate reality of deaths taking place, and that doesn't change the fact that we have to protect ourselves to the nth degree. But how does it affect our mind? How does it affect our perception of life? To what extent will it disorientate me? To what extent it will upset me to the point that it might lead me to depression, clinical depression, not just upset and sadness? To what extent will it breach the way that I deal with people and view every morning when I wake up? These are the things that we need to have context and proportion in order to maintain an equilibrium and a sense of equanimity. So that's the first part of my discussion, to understand the nature of our conflict. And in passing, I'm demonstrating to you that within the Jewish spiritual teachings, especially in Sefer Tanya, which is the magnum opus of the Alter Rebbe, we have a very good understanding, which I've only given the briefest beginning overview of the nature of human behavior and human consciousness. And I know that you have the good fortune of having Chabad, Rabbi, and Rebbitzin who are very competent in this arena. And it's very important for us to go and study our own tradition in this regard, not to dismiss what Western psychology offers. But you and I know, certainly I, that Western psychology is made up of so many different schools of thought, many of them mutually exclusive, many contradictory, that it makes it a very confusing arena to be able to learn from. Okay, so that's the area of how we respond. Are we able, however, to respond in a way which maintains the integrity of the body and integrity of the mind? And the answer is definitely. I'm going to give you a quick-fire sure mechanism, and it's called emunah and bitachon. Let me explain what these words mean. Emunah, usually translated as faith, bitachon, usually translated as trust, but they're big words. What do they really mean? Let me share with you the way that the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained these two big words. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, these weren't the Rebbe's exact words. Emunah is the belief that everything that you have ever happened to you in the past, anything which has occurred to you in the past, is for your current good, right? Sorry, I just went dark there for a moment. Everything that's ever happened in the past is for my current good, no matter what. I may have gone through pain. I may have gone through tribulation, challenge. However, it's for my current good. Bitachon is the belief that the challenge I face now will have a positive outcome. Whatever I'm facing now, it will be good. So look at that. Emunah deals from the past to the present. Whatever's ever happened to me is for my current good. Bitachon deals from the present to the future. The challenge I face now will have a positive outcome. These two are axiomatic propositions. What do I mean by axiomatic propositions? They're not provable. They're the beginning point of any discussion, of any definition. I can't prove these to you, but neither can you disprove them. We're on equal ground. There's a 50-50 statistical probability that either I'm right or the skeptic is right. But I'm going to give you good rational reasons why you should adopt these beliefs in your life. And by the way, you are all believers. Every single human being's a believer. If I were in a live lecture right now and you were in my audience, I would ask you, tell me, how did you get here? And you'll say, by car. And I say, really? Do you realize that at this moment, God forbid, someone is dying on the roads? The possibility of an accident exists, and yet modern person with perfect equanimity gets into the car and comes to the lecture or wherever. Why? Because we believe we'll get there. We're all believers. We can't function without beliefs and axioms in life. But I'm going to give you reasons why I want you to adopt these axioms. And they're as follows. We have clear evidence that people who are positively disposed have a much higher health maintenance rate. People who think positively, it translates down to the cellular level of the body. It changes the chemistry of the body. It allows you to have the kind of defense mechanisms that are so necessary in our time right now against the pandemic, for example. Angry people, for example, clear statistics again, angry people have a high incidence of ill health and death rate. That's one reason I want you to adopt a position of emunah and bitachon for your well-being, especially at this moment. Positivity. Now I'm going to give you a second rationale. Harvard University last year published the results of a multi-decade research on what contributes to happiness in people's lives. Do you know which particular factor was the most dominant factor that contributes to people's happiness? Relationships. The quality of your relationship, loving relationships. Now, if you are, God forbid, a pessimist who gives out negative vibes, people don't like to be around you. Did you know that? People like to be around positively disposed people, people who are up people. People don't like to be around down people. Therefore, the quality of your relationships remarkably improve if you have positive disposition, which leads to happiness. Once again, makes its translation down to the body also in terms of health, but also relationships, happiness as such. So I'm giving you two very strong reasons to adopt axiomatically, by faith, emunah and bitachon, a positive outlook to tomorrow. On the other hand, if you're going to focus on fear, the results will be you'll be anxious. And what is anxiousness? What is stress? Let me just segue into a consideration of what stress is. You don't catch stress like a cold. Stress doesn't exist out there. There's no such thing as stress out there. Stress is how you and I interpret the moment. In other words, I can interpret the moment in many different ways. The Alter Rebbe noted this particular fact through the teaching Moach Shalit al Halev, that the mind determines the outcome of emotions. The mind determines the outcomes of emotions. And you might say to me, Laibl, that's not so. Take me, for example, you might say, I'm a very emotional person. I let my emotions dictate. And I'll say to you, no, that's not true. And you'll come back to me and say, Laibl, you don't really know me. And I'll say, oh yes, to this extent, I do know you. Because it works like this. You can't have any emotion at all unless there's a moment of mental disposition. How can you emote without an interpretation? Now, it's true that the interpretation process might be automatic. It might be a microsecond. You're not even aware of it. So you tend to see yourself as purely emotional. But there is mind input. What the Alter Rebbe is saying to you, more mind input. Because mind possesses compass, direction, wisdom. Emotion doesn't possess a compass, but emotions provide the joie de vivre of life, joy, happiness, or God forbid, sadness and depression. But in order to ensure that you have positive emotions, you need to have a disposition of the mind. That needs practice, 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 because over the years, you might have slipped into a default response, which is not desirable. And each person here will know whether that's the case or not. Stress means that I've chosen to interpret the moment negatively. Or the way I like to put it is, stress is when you choose to be a fortune teller, when you choose to be a prophet. You're predicting the tomorrow, the outcome, the future. Tell me, are there any prophets in our audience here? If there are, my apologies. But chances are that there aren't. Neither am I. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Neither do you. And therefore, as an act of humility, allow yourself at least to have doubt. Now, having doubt, empty space, choose axiomatically to be positive. Tomorrow will be good. I will be healthy. I will have the opportunity to help somebody. Whatever might be the case. And that's what creates your personality response. Now, I know that some people will say, but hold on, I'm not free to do that. I don't have the freedom. After all, I have a genetic predisposition, or I have been environmentally processed, or my home modeling system as a child has affected me. Now, all those can exist, but they're predispositions. That's your challenge in life, predispositions, but you're still free to overcome them. You can overcome any challenge whatsoever if you do two things. One is become aware, and two is practice change. To practice change in the way that I'm talking about is reinterpretation. In psychology, we sometimes call that reframing. I'll give you an example. Someone is yelling and screaming at you. How do you respond? Well, not you, because you're very well adept, wise people. But there are some people, when they're screamed at, they act like monkeys. They copy them. They yell back. So they're doing exactly the same thing. Nothing gained there. Why? Because there's a certain moment of insecurity when you're being yelled at, that I'm inadequate, that maybe there's some truth in what they're saying, or there's a breach in relationship and I'm responsible. So what do? We compensate. How do we compensate? Raise our voice, broaden our shoulders, and give it to them. Nothing is gained that way. That's our lower order self. That's our nefesh bahamis. That's our defense mechanism. Instead, we need to reinterpret, reframe, move from nefesh bahamis to nefesh elokis. How? By asking a question with the mind, no longer emotions, mind. And the question you ask with the mind is, what's causing them to behave the way they do? You don't have to have an answer, because you generally won't have an answer. You don't know what they had for breakfast. You don't know what's happened in their life. But to ask the question, you engage the mind. And by engaging the mind, you provide a different profile for an emotional response, one of empathy, sympathy, and compassion. After all, the Dalai Lama is running around the world talking compassion. We say, oh yes, Buddhism is wonderful. It teaches compassion. Do you know where the Dalai Lama learned that from? Well, not him personally. He learned from Judaism. We learn in Hasidus and Kabbalah that the basic tool that Hashem used to create the world was chesed. Chesed means basically sharing, giving, being compassionate. Everything in the world possesses chesed. The earth possesses chesed. That's why when you put a seed into the soil, the earth wants to give of itself to force that seed to grow and become what its future could possibly be. So what we're saying is chesed, compassion, in this respect, is our number one expression. If you can train yourself to move from fear, anxiousness, and stress to other-centeredness rather than self-centeredness, giving, sharing, contribution, from nefesh bahamis to nefesh elokis, you can completely transform your quality of life. You can transform how your state of happiness is and have a very important immune response mechanism to illness. Okay. Now a little bit about meditation. In other words, how do you make this happen? How do I change my default response, which I don't like? I don't like the way I respond sometimes. How do I change it? It's already ingrained. What does it mean, ingrained? When you do something over and over again, what happens is when you have a certain thought pattern, if I can put it simplistically, the neurotransmitters in the brain flow from this nerve end fiber to this nerve end fiber. And there's a pathway that the neurotransmitting pathway takes. That's called a thought. I'm simplifying. Once you repeat that thought, it cuts a deep groove. So it's easier for it to repeat itself. And that, after a while, becomes known as habit because it's repeated over and over again. So how do you undo it? How do you undo habits of mind, habits of consciousness? The answer is you have to define a new pathway. And you have to practice and repeat that new pathway. Whether you do it through visualization, whether you do it through sound base, whether you do it through other methodologies. By creating a new pathway, a new thought pattern, you become defaulted to that one, and the old one tends to fade away. Now, I've put that, as I said, very simplistically, but that's how I train people. Some people come to me and say, Laibl, I wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't go back to sleep. I'm just too worried about things. So I train them by choosing 3 very powerful emotional instances in their life that they can recall with their mind, which were extremely happy and uplifting. And I ask them to practice that meditationally over and over again. I tell them how and for how long and at what frequency, depending on what the situation is. And by doing that, they allow themselves to default to positive thinking, positive thought patterns, away from negative thought patterns. It takes 2-3 months, but they succeed. Meditation is a tool. It's not an end in its own right. There's no virtue in meditating. There's virtue in meditating for a reason, not just because I want to practice meditation. There's nothing gained by that. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, in a wonderful discourse in 1979, noted that for most people, you don't need to use meditation as a mechanism, but there may well be circumstances, and he was anticipating the kind of world which we find ourselves today in, a stressed world, where meditation plays a significant role in retraining yourself. And the second reason the Rebbe said that one would practice meditation, and that's for everybody, is the way that Chabad generally does. In the morning, before davening, before prayers, you sit and study a wisdom teaching, and then at the end of that, you take one particular idea and you spend time focusing on it, meditating on it, internalizing it, so that it becomes expressed in the behavior of the day. That's a format of meditation called hisboinenus. I'm going to take you through a little journey of meditation in terms of how to be able to change thought patterns. And I'm going to try to induce within you a sense of security in our current COVID era. And to be able to repeat this particular process until such time you develop a sense of confidence. And by having that confidence, you are actually increasing your immunity and you're helping your body defense. So you're performing a mitzvah that way. And also you end up having, as I said, better relationships by being a positive person. So let's go and do this little exercise for a few minutes. Just adopt a position of symmetry wherever you might be, with your hands resting on your knees or thighs, your back fairly straight, your head well positioned on your shoulders, feet symmetrically on the ground, and gently close your eyes and just focus on your breath. Gently breathing in and breathing out quite normally. Just observe the breath with your mind, entering and exiting. And if you can, you should prefer to breathe in and out through your nose for this exercise. As you breathe in through your nose, feel the relative coolness of the air. And as you breathe out, become aware of a slightly warmer quality to the air you breathe out. Continue breathing in and out, focusing on that temperature differential. Cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. And just spend a few breaths focusing on the temperature. And with your next breath in, slower and deeper, direct it down through the lungs, but below the lungs, down to your abdomen, so it seems. So a deep breath in, expand your abdomen as you breathe in, creating space for the air to flow all the way down. And then contract your abdomen to expel the air. So, on the in-breath, you'll expand your abdomen. Take a slow, deep breath in, expanding your abdomen, collecting the air, and then pulling your tummy in to expel the air. The trick is to expand your abdomen as you breathe in. If you do it slowly and deeply, it's easier. Deep abdominal breathing, expanding the abdomen on the in-breath. And now let's lend some rhythm to the breathing. We'll breathe in for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, and breathe out for a count of 4. So take a slow, deep breath in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. Through the nose and abdomen, in, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4. And just continue breathing down to your abdomen with the in-breath, rhythmically, slowly, gracefully, smoothly. A perfect cycle. And just be aware how relaxed you've become in the space of a few short minutes. Everything breathes. Hashem breathes life into the universe. Hashem's breath expresses as night and day, in and out. The tide comes in, the tide goes out, in and out. The flower petal opens and closes. Hashem breathes in and out through the universe. Now that you're in a relaxed state, let's move to our exercise, overcoming stress by feeling confidence. Become aware of a light source in your head. Imagine a source of light in your headspace, pleasant, warm, a source of light. The edge of the inflow of soul in your head. Allow that light source to brighten so that the light intensity throughout your face and head becomes more illuminated. Feeling warm, comfortable, safe. Increase the intensity of that light source so the light begins to flow down through your neck into your torso, your chest and back area. Feel the light flow, illuminating the upper part of your body, comfortably, warm. Increase the intensity a little bit more in your head, allowing the light now to flow through your upper limbs, through your shoulders, arms, hands, fingers. Increase the intensity even further, comfortably so, allowing the air to flow to the lower limbs of your body, through your thighs, legs, feet, toes, feeling your whole body infused with a pleasant, warm light. Increase the intensity again and allow the light to flow through your skin, the surface of your whole skin area, creating an aura around you, literally emanating your light all around you. That aura around you we call the Magen Avraham, the shield of Abraham, your protective layer. Be aware of that aura around you, radiating through your skin. Your soul extends from your body all around you, protecting you. To activate the shield, all you need to do is to become aware of it. Like a mezuzah, it deflects all negative energies away from you. Intensify the light even more in your head so that it flows beyond your aura, so that your aura extends over your home, over your family, extends into the world, helping protect the world, heal the world, providing a shield for those in need. You make a difference to the world through your personal neshama, your soul, your light source. Make a commitment to be aware at all times of that aura around you, the Magen Avraham, Abraham's shield, protecting you. Feel confident, feel safe. Focus again now on your breath entering your nostrils and flowing out from your nostrils. Cooler air entering, warmer air exiting. Begin moving your fingers and your toes here in the room. Move your fingers, move your toes. And when you feel ready, gently open your eyes, coming all the way back to our session together. Well, that was one exercise amongst others that one can use for the purposes that we discussed earlier. And as I said, meditation is a tool to be used amongst other tools in order to be able to benefit ourselves. Perhaps we'll discuss that a bit later in questions and answers. So before we move into a little bit of dialogue, let me just explain why we used breath as the initial exercise. The Hebrew for breath is neshima, which of course is etymologically linked to the word neshama, soul, because breath is the first level of expression of the soul. The way a person breathes tells us about the inner dynamics. There's a wonderful pasuk in Chumash, which is in our current readings, when Moses first came to Mitzrayim and wanted to tell the Jewish people, you're going to leave here, you're going to be free, you're going to reach the promised land. They didn't listen to him. And the text says that they were refusing him because of stressed breathing. The Koshes Ruach, Rashi explains that when a person is under stress, their breath takes a faster beat and demonstrates externally what's happening inside. Through biofeedback technique, we can change the inside from the outside. By changing the way you breathe, you can change the inner dynamic, which is why you achieved a state of rest as a consequence of changing the way you breathe. And that's the relationship of neshima to neshama, just to explain that first part. Okay, I'm happy to open our discussion, Rabbi. By the way, I put on the chat for everybody my email address. I provide every day a 3-minute meditation exercise, which comes on WhatsApp. So if you want to receive it, just email me with your cell number, and that way you'll receive it on WhatsApp. Don't forget your cell number. That's all I have at the moment from me. I'd love to hear from you.
Anyone have any questions? Floor is open.
I don't want to feel that I've browbeaten you to submission so quickly.
I'll ask the question.
Sure.
Yep.
So in the beginning of your chat, you had talked about how the fact that the neshama comes into your body, and actually sight is the ability for the neshama to have that experience. Same with everything else. And now you have referenced the fact that neshama is very close to the nishama, which is breath. So it seems to me that the reason why they're so interlinked is just going back on what the very first thing is that you said, is that once the breath is gone, the neshama now morphs into something else. And then my other question was, people seem to very much people in general are very mimetic in their behavior, as you were talking about beforehand. And so at what point can or does the neshama even get involved or can intercept mimetic behavior?
Okay. The neshama expresses through layers of what you and I might call subconsciousness. And the word subconsciousness is a psychological term which mainly says, I haven't got any idea what we're talking about. And therefore we use the word subconsciousness because that way we don't have to explain it. In Hasidus and Kabbalah, there's a lot of explanation of what the English summary word subconsciousness is. And the model that's used is the model of the Sfirot. And we have Sfirot, which are aptitudes of future expressions of mind, 3 of these Sfirot, and 7, which are future expressions of emotion. They morph in through the body into these expressions. And then there's a gradual flow through the body in the way that ultimately the soul can manifest itself in time and space in the real world. So what I'm trying to explain is there's a whole process. It's not a question of how can I get my soul to do A, B, and C. It's how the soul actually operates through the body and how I take the spacesuit and reorganize it in a way which optimizes the flow of the soul. So in short, the answer to your question is we have to fiddle around with the spacesuit, with the body, in order to allow the soul, which is always perfect, which is always grown up, which is always, by the way, the same soul that's existed from the moment of creation. Whenever you reincarnate with the same soul. You get a different body, different circumstances of life, different environment, different parents, but the soul remains the same. And then it has to operate through that body. So I think that what I'm saying to you is that, Astrid, that the idea is to understand the complete full soul is operating through a mechanism called the body to express. Now, and breath, therefore, is one already conscious way of expressing the soul.
Yes.
Thought process is another one. Speech process is even more so, and behavior even more so. So these are layers of the obstacle course that the soul navigates in order to express itself.
Got it.
Does that address it?
It does. Thank you so much.
Alex, I think you had a question. Alex.
Yeah, I guess a lot of questions, but I'll ask one. What is a good source for practical daily meditations? Like I've used to do like Vipassana, more Buddhist meditation.
Yes.
And this, what I find is that there's so many different types of what people will call Jewish meditations, and
Yes,
what I like to do is have one or two just to do consistently.
sure, sure,
But there's so many out there, so I'm wondering if you have a good
sure.
source to find them, or.
It's very interesting. In the late 60s, early 70s, some very enterprising Hindu gurus made their way across to the West and introduced or reintroduced meditation. But in fact, it was the meditation format of focusing from the East. Nothing wrong with that, except that many of these had what, from a Jewish vantage point, is called avodah zarah, idol worship aspects to it, which offends and hurts the Jewish soul. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1979, unlike other rabbis who forbade the practice of meditation, fearing this contamination, if you will, spiritually of the Jewish soul, said what we need to do is get rid of the negative elements, but meditation itself is a technique that can help certain people, and therefore advised that medical individuals, people in psychology and others actually create meditative techniques that are able to be neutral in their orientation, but help physically, physiologically, the human being. But you're asking about Jewish meditation. Now, meditation is a process. Jewish meditation is why I use that process. That's what makes meditation Jewish. My goal, my purpose. If my goal and purpose is to change myself for the better according to the value system of the Torah, then that goal is very much one that you should be able to pursue. If I were to advise you to come specifically to your question, what is an excellent one to practice? It's on how we wake up in the morning, how we can express the modeh ani, which is a phraseology of gratitude, how we can adopt a posture of gratitude first thing in the morning so that it colors the content of the day. I can certainly, if you email me, send you a copy of meditation based on the modeh ani. There's also a very wonderful book which I would recommend to you. It's not a book on meditation, but it's a book on the modeh ani, which will give you a basis of why I'm recommending that as a source of meditation. And Rabbi, you'll have to help me. I know the Hebrew, Kuntras Inyana Shel Teres Chasidus. It's put out in the Hasidic Heritage series, and it's probably called it's called the Essence of Chasidus.
On the essence of Chassidus, yeah.
On the essence of Chasidus. And it really is a wonderful treatise by the Lubavitcher Rebbe explaining why gratitude first up in the morning is so terribly important, and explaining the gratitude at 4 separate levels of consciousness. So that's where I would make a high recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we'll take one more question. Well, I think that wraps it up.
Can I just ask Orit where her parents and grandparents originate from?
It's actually Scott. I'm married to Ori.
You are Orit, okay.
Yeah, kind of.
Yes.
So my dad is Weintraub.
Yes.
And his family is from.
Where are they from?
Well, it dates all the way back to like Russia. So yeah.
Okay. Fine. All right. No problem. My Weintraub dates to Poland in Lvov, so we may be related, but unlikely. Okay.
That's very interesting. Well, I'll email you and see if there's any link there for sure. I'd
love to. No problem. So thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing time with all of you. Thank you very, very much, Rabbi and Rebbetzin, for providing the facility. I look forward to staying in touch. Do email me. And I want to wish you all a Hatzlacha and a very wonderful Yontov today of Tu B'Shvat. May you grow to be as strong as a tree in the way that the rabbi said, that your roots of faith become really firmly planted in the ground, that your trunk of commitment be strong, that the branches branch out in your family in all directions, that the leaves that color you and the beautiful, vibrant colors, your thoughts, words, and behaviors express you ideally. Be well. Look forward to seeing you again.
Amen. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
That was great.
Thanks, Sameach.
Thank you.